In business, every crisis has a cost. But when arrogance becomes the crisis, the price isn't measured in dollars, it's measured in survival. The email slammed into my inbox at 7:58, urgent, 0800 ASAP. No subject line, just a wall of caps lock panic from someone who had probably never smelled a real crisis. My name is Grant Harlow, 49, divorced, former Special Forces, and for the last 18 years I've kept America's freight industry alive when everything else threatened to fall apart. That morning, some privileged kid was about to learn why that kind of experience is worth more than any business school degree. Old soldier habits die hard. I walked in at 7:55, because discipline means you're never late, not even to your own execution. Adrian Faulkner was already in my chair. 28, wearing a designer blazer too tight across the shoulders, tapping a gold pen against the table like he was ordering dessert instead of cutting out the guy who had built half the company's backbone. "Grant," he said, dragging my name across his tongue like it tasted spoiled. "Appreciate you coming early. Let's keep this short." The HR rep sat frozen in the corner, eyes glued to the floor. That silence was louder than words. I knew the verdict before the trial began. Adrian launched into a stream of LinkedIn buzzwords: efficiency review, legacy costs, streamlining structures. Then the knife, effective immediately, your position is eliminated. He smiled like he'd just solved world hunger by firing the one person who stopped their entire logistics chain from collapsing. That familiar tightness hit my chest, the same rage that had almost gotten me court-martialed on my second deployment. But 18 years of corporate self-control kept it caged. No speeches, no begging. I slid my laptop across the table like dealing a hand of cards. Then I stood. "Roger that, kid." I walked through my office collecting my personal items, family photos, a Special Forces challenge coin, and a quote from my drill instructor: "Preparation prevents failure." Then, hidden beneath the bottom drawer, I grabbed a flash drive labeled Clause 15D. At 49, starting over wasn't exactly in the plan. 2 kids in college, alimony checks, and now this. But soldiers adapt. I didn't badge out, just told the receptionist, "Don't cancel my access yet." The kid thought he'd cut dead weight. He didn't know he'd just unplugged the power source. 20 minutes later, I was standing in my kitchen, setting the cardboard box of personal belongings onto the table. The bottle of Glenlivet I'd been saving for a special day sat untouched. Work first, whiskey later. Instead, I walked straight to the steel security cabinet tucked in the corner. The 6-digit code hadn't changed in 18 years. Inside, contracts, old evaluations, and one sealed envelope marked in red, "Faulkner Original." That was the contract from the days when Walter Faulkner Sr. was bleeding cash so fast the company was weeks from collapse. I hadn't just stepped in, I rebuilt their entire back end on my own time, in my own kitchen, living on takeout and stubborn grit. When the company pulled back from the edge, I didn't ask for a fat bonus. I asked for something smarter. And Walter Sr., desperate to save his legacy, gave it to me. Clause 15D, buried in 3 dense paragraphs of legal jargon. But the meaning was sharp as a blade. All intellectual property written on personal equipment remained mine. A 4% equity stake triggered if revenue thresholds were passed, which they had, 5 years ago, with not a dime paid. And the big one, no executive restructuring could be executed without my written approval if my systems were still active. They were. In fact, they'd only rebranded my Harlow Freight Protocol to Faulkner Logistics 3.0 last year, as if a new coat of paint could hide the foundation I had poured with my own hands. I pulled out my phone and scanned the documents. 1 copy to my personal email. 1 to my attorney, the same lawyer who helped me write Clause 15D. And 1 to Chuck Hanley, board member who once told me over beers, "If those kids ever turn on you, send me proof, and they'll handle the politics." By the time I finished, 3 things were undeniable. Adrian had made a catastrophic legal error, the company was now exposed on multiple fronts, and I was the one holding all the cards. The whiskey could wait. Tomorrow wasn't about revenge. Tomorrow was about teaching the entire board why you never try to bury a soldier who survived real wars. Tuesday morning, Walter Faulkner Sr. returned from medical leave, moving slower than usual, surgical stitches tugging at his side and a temper already frayed. Leaving his son Adrian in charge, he realized now, had been like handing a chainsaw to a toddler. At the elevator, his longtime assistant Gloria Hunt, Army veteran, 61, steel-eyed and utterly fearless, met him with a stack of papers and a sticky note that read, "Coffee first." The moment Walter stepped into his office, he saw it. My contract. 3 printed copies stacked neatly in the center of his desk like a live grenade. Clause 15D circled in red ink. For a second, he tried to convince himself it was just noise, some bitter ex-employee hoping to squeeze a settlement. Then his eyes landed on his own signature at the bottom of the contract, notarized and dated the same week I had dragged his company back from the brink with systems I had written on decade-old equipment. Walter dropped into his chair, stomach twisting worse than his stitches. Not from recovery but from recognition. He had made this deal. He had signed away leverage because I had saved his empire. And now, thanks to his son, I owned the trigger that could destroy it. "Gloria," he called, his voice low. "Bring him up." Walter stared at the contract like it was his own death warrant. In corporate terms, maybe it was. Moments later, Adrian Faulkner breezed in with that MBA swagger. "Welcome back, old man. Don't worry, I streamlined things while you were gone. Cut the fat. Lean, mean, efficient. Just like you always preached." Walter's jaw clenched. "Did you fire Grant Harlow?" "Yeah, totally clean. HR approved. His role was outdated, dead weight." Adrian dropped into a chair, bouncing his knee like caffeine was dripping through his veins. "We need fresh blood." Walter's voice stayed calm, but his words were knives. "Did you even read his contract?" Adrian shrugged. 100 pages of legal garbage. He probably sent the board some old PDF to fish for a payout. Standard disgruntled employee move. Walter slid the contract across the desk. Clause 15, paragraph D, veto rights over executive changes if his systems are still active. Which they are. You breached it the second you signed his termination. Adrian blinked, his arrogance cracking. That can't be real. Why would you ever agree to that? Because 18 years ago, this company was bleeding to death, and Grant built the system that kept us alive. Walter's patience snapped. That clause is real. So is his equity stake. If he pushes this, he doesn't just get his job back, he owns part of yours. Color drained from Adrian's face. But I filed the paperwork. Severance is already processed. Then pray he doesn't cash it. Walter watched as something inside his son finally broke. Confidence fueled by LinkedIn posts and fancy degrees was gone. Reality had walked in, and it was carrying my name. By Wednesday morning, the cracks began to show. First, a shipment out of Cleveland vanished from the system, just gone, no trace. The client called twice, furious on the third ring. Thursday brought missing invoices, entire batches disappearing as if they had never existed. Friday, a truckload of industrial batteries got rerouted to Maine instead of Maryland, costing nearly $7,000 in corrections. Each problem alone was manageable. Together, they spelled out the exact disasters I had spent 18 years preventing. Without my oversight, the walls began to bleed. The office buzzed with nervous energy. My name floated in whispers around coffee machines, tucked into Slack threads, hidden inside lunch conversations. "Did you hear about that contract? He had serious IP rights. They say he emailed the board before he even left the parking lot." And then came the silence from Chuck Hanley. A man who never stayed quiet unless something big was brewing. That silence said more than words. Like the stillness in the woods before a storm. The smoking gun arrived when Ethan Ross, a junior developer, stumbled across the truth. Reviewing routine code dependencies, he found the one thing no one else had looked for. Deep inside the routing system was a permanent line copyright G. Harlow Freight Protocol. Do not modify without legal clearance. He checked the logs. Not only had I written the original framework, but my protocols were the framework. Renamed, repackaged, dressed up, but the skeleton that carried their billion-dollar logistics chain was mine. Ethan did what smart young employees do. He screenshot everything, zipped the files, and dropped a printed copy on his manager's desk with a note, "Pretty sure we owe Harlow royalties." That note traveled fast. 3 desks by lunch. HR by 3 p.m. Legal by 5. By Monday, Walter Faulkner's inbox had 15 email threads marked urgent, Harlow IP rights. And me? I didn't tweet. I didn't post on LinkedIn. I didn't say a word. Because absence is sometimes louder than presence. No threats. No theatrics. Just quiet chaos spreading through every system ID ever touched. And in the center of that chaos, one truth crystallized: I wasn't just a former employee. I was the loaded weapon they'd dared to drop on the table. And now Adrian Faulkner was about to learn what happens when you declare war on someone who actually knows how to fight one. Subject line hit their inbox at 6:02 a.m. sharp. Notice of contract breach, Clause 15D/IP ownership review. Sent before half the executive floor had wiped the sleep from their eyes. My timing had always been surgical. 5 paragraphs. No fluff, no anger. Just facts. On the date of termination, I was informed without prior consultation that my position was eliminated. Per Clause 15D, such restructuring requires my written consent while Harlow Freight Protocol remains in operational use. Termination occurred without such consent. For reference, I've attached documentation of intellectual property, active code samples, and the original signed contract. While I assume this was administrative oversight, legal implications of breach and royalty delinquency require immediate review. I am available for resolution discussions. Attachments: Faulkner original contract, HFP IP summary, operations code excerpts. I copied only the board. No HR. No Adrian. Then I made breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast, black coffee. Business as usual. Because for me, it was just routine. People mistake silence for surrender. That's always their first mistake. By 8 a.m., replies were already pouring in. Martha Collins, compliance officer, when are you available? Chuck Hanley, we need to talk. Immediately. At 8:37, someone blind copied me on an internal thread, urgent review, termination protocols plus legal exposure. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Corporate panic has a smell. And once you've lived through firefights, you know exactly when fear is spreading. By 9:10, emergency meetings began. Boardroom doors closed early, schedules cleared. Someone even canceled Adrian's Innovation Culture webinar without telling him. Walter walked into the boardroom carrying legal binders, face pale as if he were walking into his own sentencing. The legal team was already digging, pulling every signature Adrian had authorized since my exit: vendor contracts, system updates, flashy new partnerships. All of them sat on the backbone I had written, without compensation. The words willful infringement appeared in email threads. So did malicious restructuring and retroactive equity obligations. One attorney wrote bluntly, "This isn't just wrongful termination. He may actually own critical company assets." Meanwhile, outside those glass walls, Adrian posted selfies on LinkedIn about disruptive leadership. Inside, real disruption was tearing his empire apart. And me? I still hadn't replied to a single message. Because power doesn't announce itself. It just arrives with evidence sharp enough to end careers. Adrian Faulkner found out about the board meeting the same way he'd been finding out about everything lately last. He strolled into the executive lounge mid-morning, overpriced latte in hand, scrolling LinkedIn like it held the answers to life itself. That's when he noticed Chuck Hanley and Martha Collins slipping into conference room B with Walter and the legal team. No invitation. No warning. Gloria Hunt passed him in the hallway carrying folders stamped, Harlow IP/Clause 15D. Something cold slid into Adrian's chest. The first taste of consequence. He rushed back to his office, slammed the door, dialed my number. Ring. Ring. Voicemail. Tried again. Straight to voicemail. Hey Grant, maybe we got off on the wrong foot, his voice cracked. Let's talk, figure this out privately, okay? 15 minutes later my auto-reply pinged his inbox. Currently unavailable. If urgent, contact someone who didn't call me non-essential. Adrian hurled his phone against the wall, a crystal paperweight crashing to the floor, shattering into sharp reminders that control was an illusion. Then he made his biggest mistake yet. Storming down to the development floor, he cornered Ethan Ross, the junior developer who'd found my copyright tags. I need to see the system logs. All of them. Show me exactly what Harlow built. His breath was heavy, his voice unsteady. Ethan pulled up the operations terminal with trembling hands. Line after line of code filled the screen. Highlighted at the top, copyright G. Harlow, HFP Core Logic version 3.2. Do not modify without legal clearance. Below it, use without license constitutes breach of intellectual property ownership. It was everywhere. Hundreds of watermarks embedded into routing algorithms, load balancers, and core logic histories. Adrian's eyes darted. What if we just modernized everything? Stripped out his tags, updated the code. Quick fix. Ethan froze mid-keystroke. Sir. That would be fraud. Who said fraud? I'm talking innovation. Creative solutions. His voice sounded like someone who thought bribes worked outside of movies. Maybe worth a little. Bonus for your discretion? Ethan didn't say a word. Sometimes silence is louder than any whistle you could blow. By 4 p.m., HR and legal had Ethan's email with the subject line, "This conversation made me uncomfortable. Please advise." 30 minutes later, that email was sitting in front of Chuck Hanley and the emergency board session Adrian still hadn't been invited to join. By 5:15, Adrian's keycard access had been quietly downgraded. Not revoked, just restricted. He wouldn't notice until he tried opening a door that wouldn't budge. Desperation has a smell. And once it starts leaking, it draws the kind of attention that topples kingdoms. Walter Faulkner didn't knock. He just stood at my doorstep longer than any CEO should, holding a manila folder like it contained his company's death certificate. He wasn't in a suit, just slacks and a windbreaker. Not the attire of a man running a business. The clothes of someone walking into surrender. I opened the door without a word. No greetings, no small talk. My house looked exactly like what you'd expect from a divorced soldier, clean, practical, nothing wasted. The dining table was covered with case studies, contracts, family photos, and yellow legal pads filled with notes that looked more like tactical battle plans than reminders. Walter didn't ask for coffee. I didn't offer. I was wrong, he started, staring at the documentation spread before him. I should never have given him that position. Thought responsibility would teach him what leadership costs. I never imagined he'd try to destroy the one person who kept us alive through every crisis. But he did, I said flatly. Silence stretched between us like barbed wire. Walter studied my preparation like a man watching his own mistakes written in ink. I slid a folder across the table. Reinstatement offer. Immediate effect. 6 months back pay. Retroactive equity adjustment for milestones achieved using my IP. 3-year licensing contract for all current and derivative systems. My terms. Walter didn't open it. Just stared. And if I don't sign? I walk into North Star Freight Lines tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Already had coffee with their CTO. He knows what I built, understands what I own, and he's very interested in exclusive licensing rights. Especially now, with your legal exposure hanging over you. Walter's voice dropped to a whisper. You'd really burn it all down? I tilted my head. I'd charge fair market value for what it's worth. That landed. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't wounded pride. This was business, cold, calculated, exact. I had built my case the same way I had rebuilt his network during every crisis, methodically, precisely, without leaving a single weakness. "You don't want the old job back?" Walter asked. "Not like it was. But I'll take something better. Something with respect built in." He reached for a pen with unsteady hands. "I'll handle Adrian," he muttered. "No." I raised a hand. "Let him face the board first. Let him learn what non-essential feels like when it's applied to him." Walter looked up. "You always said you didn't believe in revenge." For the first time in days, I smiled. "I don't. I believe in consequences." He signed without another word. 3 hours later, Adrian Faulkner strutted into the boardroom like he was delivering a TED Talk nobody asked for. His blazer hugged too tight, his trademark smirk glued in place. He scanned the room for approval. None came. The silence was thick, the kind that always precedes an execution. Then he saw me. Sitting at the far end of the table, calm, unmoved, a folder closed neatly in front of me. My hands folded, my face unreadable. I didn't nod. Didn't acknowledge him. Just waited. Adrian's swagger faltered. He cleared his throat twice, adjusted his collar. "Good morning, everyone. Excited to share operational improvements and—" "No need," Chuck Hanley cut him off, not even looking up. "We've had a thorough morning reviewing recent decisions." Adrian blinked. "I'm sorry." Martha Collins read from her notes, Clause 15, Paragraph D. "No structural or leadership changes, including termination, can be executed without written consent of Mr. Harlow while his systems remain active." They did. They still do. The company's counsel added, "Discovery shows 78% of operations rely on proprietary code authored by Harlow Freight Protocol. Unauthorized modification would take a minimum of 8 months and full relicensing." I stayed silent. Walter sat at the head, watching his son finally confront reality without rescue. Adrian laughed nervously. "Come on, we're professionals. Grant, you could have come to me directly instead of—" I finally moved. Opened the folder slowly, slid a flash drive across polished wood. Press play. The wall lit up with the freight dashboard I had built. Real-time routing, predictive analytics, optimization tools all humming flawlessly. In the bottom corner, small but permanent, powered by G. Harlow IP Holdings. The silence that followed had weight. Career-ending weight. The CFO broke it. "We've already had 3 vendors contact us. One is threatening litigation over undisclosed IP in licensing contracts. Without immediate resolution, we face breach claims, retroactive royalties, and a full relicensing of the system." Adrian's jaw clenched. "So you're choosing him over me?" "We're choosing the company over liability," Hanley said coldly. He turned to me. "Mr. Harlow, do your terms remain the same?" I rose slowly, straightened my tie. "Actually, they've changed." Gasps rippled around the room. "I won't be returning. Yesterday I accepted an executive role at Summit Cargo Lines. Full IP autonomy, equity participation, and operational independence. No Faulkners involved." Adrian opened his mouth. I cut him off with a look sharp enough to silence him. 17 years of discipline condensed into one stare. I gathered my papers, walked to the door. Paused. "First advice, change every system password. I wouldn't trust the current protocols." Walking out of that building for the last time, I didn't feel revenge. Not satisfaction. Just balance. The order restored, competence rewarded, respect earned, consequences delivered. Behind me, Adrian slumped in his chair. Nobody asked for his input. Nobody ever would again. Outside, I sat in my truck for a long breath. 17 years building something. A spoiled kid tried to erase it in a morning. Instead, his arrogance gave me everything back with interest. Soldiers don't retreat. We advance to better ground. Sometimes the greatest victory is walking away from a fight you've already won, carrying everything they tried to steal. My phone buzzed. A text from my oldest. Dad, saw the news about your new role. Proud of you for not settling. I smiled, turned the ignition, and drove toward whatever came next. Because experience doesn't just matter sometimes, it's the only thing that does. Thank you for staying with me through my story. If these words touched you, if they stirred something in you or made you reflect on your own journey, I ask only 3 small things. Like the video so others can find it. Leave a comment, share your story, or simply tell me what struck you the hardest. Subscribe because more stories are coming, and you won't want to miss what's ahead. This isn't where my journey ends. It's where something far greater begins. And I'm grateful you're here to share it with me.